Welcome to the Skaterade podcast. I'm Jasmine.
I'm Mac.
I sold today's guest his second pair of roller skates. He came into the shop looking for an upgrade from the ubiquitous starter pair of Chicago skates. Since then, he's been in for other upgrades, and it's been so cool to be a small part of his evolution as a skater. We're here with Kenny of Respect My Skates Alliance and OK Bleep. He's a dedicated skater and community member with a passion for shaping dialogues around personal autonomy and boundaries, making the skate community better than he found it. What I admire most about Kenny is that he doesn't turn a blind eye to difficult topics, and it's an honor to chat with him today.
Hey, Kenny.
Hello, it's an honor to be on the podcast. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
So, let's get it started with some specifics around your experience with roller skating. Kenny, how did you discover dance skating?
So I discovered dance skating, first starting roller skating 2 years ago at Riverbank. And I just showed up to just skate. I didn't know that rhythm skating even existed. And that was the first place I saw people doing the downtown, people doing all these different types of tricks and trains. I didn't have a name for it before, but that was my first time seeing everything in person. Life changing because here I am today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Riverbank is a park in Harlem. It sits on top of a water waste plant, so it's very unique. And I think it's maybe one of the largest rinks I've ever been to. It's a state park. So yeah, that's Riverbank. It's a very cool gem that people don't really know about, and I'm hoping more people will learn about it so more energy is pumped into that space and more events and programming can happen. But that's my start, my home base place, and it has much more than roller skating, but that's what anchors me down there is the rink and the floor.
Very cool. One thing that strikes me about you as a skater is your focus and your commitment. How has that shaped your confidence and ability as a skater?
What a question. Yeah, so it's actually an interesting question because I would never think of it as me growing my confidence from skating. It was more of an activity that I was doing to heal myself in terms of like mental health and having something to keep my body active. And throughout my skate journey, I've become more confident because of skating. And being forced to look at a video of me skating and forced me to look at all my insecurities and get over the insecurities so I could see what I'm doing to perfect or to get to the next level. So the confidence was built in just by the exercise. I was showing up, skating, and wanted to be better. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned skating kind of being for kind of like movement, mental health stuff. Can you share a little bit more about that as well?
Right. So my beginning stages of skating actually went through something very traumatic in terms of family related trauma and also social trauma. And I guess for more context, this is right after the pandemic, or actually as things were opening up. It was a traumatic year, and I was in the moment of just kind of figuring out what to do with life, and knowing how depression works for me. Like I know I have to keep my body moving. I was at Riverbank, not to skate, but just to like for mental clarity. I was looking over at the bridge, journaling. And as I was journaling, just thinking of ways to continue moving my body. And I ended up walking around the park and finding the skating rink and realizing I was like, okay, this is one of the activities, an additional activity to add to the list of making sure I'm moving my body. And it was like the perfect activity because, I ended up moving my body and discovering so much more and forming beautiful friendships and relationships, traveling. So just like that whole process of me figuring things out had led me to the right place to be able to move my body and to not just move my body, but move my body to music and have fun versus it being like a strict regiment of, going to therapy, which isn't a bad thing, but this is something that was so different that healed in a way that I didn't even know was possible. So many thanks
Yeah, and
for this activity and this lifestyle. Yes.
especially because yeah, like certain things like going to therapy or something, right? It's like it can be helpful, but it's also like there's a level of like work to it. And with skating, there's work that you put in, especially for someone who's consistent. You're working on new tricks, like skills, things like that. But at the same time, there's so much like play and self-expression involved in skating, which I think can be such an important element that we don't always get in other spaces,
Hmm.
and relationship, you know. Mm-hmm.
Right. There's also the aspect of it's like my own journey, and I guess you can say the same thing with therapy, but my own journey that leads to fun, more and more fun. You know, if there's a move that I wanted to figure out, it's up to me to figure out how to move that move works versus someone telling me how to do it. Someone can show me, but it's up to me to practice that. And in comparison to therapy, you can see a therapist and a therapist can give you advice, but you know, when do you take the advice? When do you do the thing? But with roller skating, it's a lot of more self-reflection and that self-reflection that we see and we feel in our bodies versus just a thought in the mind. So love roller skating.
Another really key component to the roller skating experience are the people and the friends that we make along the way. Can you tell us about some of the most impactful relationships you've built through roller skating?
Oh yeah, the most impactful relationships were actually started at Riverbank, and the yeah, one of my best. It's even hard to call her best friend. She feels like a sister. So when I met through roller skating at Riverbank, finding people who speak this, I call it speaking the same language. We have the same, very similar backgrounds and understanding of how we approach things and how we show up to have fun and just like one of the biggest surprises that I would have ever expected, especially going through such a traumatic experience, to find community in such a beautiful way, in a very organic way, just never thought would even happen. Yeah, the relationships that I've built have been relationships of, continuing to have fun together, but also finding places to have fun together. Riverbank closes for the winter season. So that's where things kind of intensified of like, okay, who am I traveling with to go to this other place to go skate? And that innately builds on, these friendships that are so much stronger than a skate friendship. It's like love, it's friendship, it's some people call it sisterhood, brotherhood, brother sisterhood, whatever you want to call it. I'm so thankful for it because I would have never imagined.
So for me, this also brings up the idea of chosen family. What does the concept of chosen family conjure for you in relationship to skate community?
That's an intense question because chosen family. So I come from a queer nightlife background where there was this idea of chosen family, and something that I'm still figuring out today of how to navigate, terminology like that, or even if it's terminology of other, however you describe it, like how to go about, ch- you know, chosen family, if it's community. And for me, just in life, I've learned it was such a hard question to answer. It's such a complicated
Yeah.
question for me, at least. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe
that's
it
a
just
hard
feels like
one.
a really loaded term, which I understand.
Yeah, so it's a loaded term that's hard to dissect. It speaks to what I'm building with RMSA because you can have chosen family, but what does it look like beyond the eyes of whoever's looking, or just the title of chosen family? Like, what does problem solving look like? Which is actually like the biggest. I guess that's what the thing I was avoiding saying, the elephant of the conversation of chosen family, but also how to
Yeah.
maintain chosen family, how we meet, how do we delegate, how do we problem solve. So that's something that I'm always working on and working towards figuring out because chosen family could be here today and then not tomorrow, and that's kind of like something I'm trying to avoid with what I'm building with RMSA.
Yeah, so speaking of RMSA, what is RMSA?
So, RMSA, Respect My Space Alliance, aka Respect My Skates, is an alliance that I formed, but something to address the predatory behavior that I've experienced. And so, something I formed to address the predatory behavior that I experience and other people have experienced in the skate community, the rhythm skating community here in New York. Something that really led me to really uh, step into the position of leadership is me realizing that this is not just a New York situation, it's a situation that happens all over the states. And just seeing how people were complaining and, you know, there was conflict happening in other states that made me realize, okay, there's an issue to tackle, and there's multiple issues to tackle. The aspect of community. How do we define community, and how do we bring these different cultures and together, cultures and ages together, demographics together, and still have fun together? And yeah, how do we find more spaces? How do we find more spaces in New York to skate that is safe and inclusive and a space that is forever evolving versus the spaces that I've experienced in New York. So that all, you know, led to RMSA, respect my space, aka respect my skates.
And with that, so with RMSA, you kind of started this, and I guess, can you also give us kind of a vision for what you want this to kind of be doing in the community and what your sort of vision is for it? And I know there's also a code of conduct, right? So there's kind of this idea of putting something out into the skate community as a sort of a guideline for people, as sort of a framework for people. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Sure. So my vision is to have a space, whatever that looks like, if it's a community center, whatever, really, to implement a code of conduct where from the door you understand how to respect people, how to communicate with people, so no boundaries are being crossed from the beginning. You know, if we have the conversation from the beginning, then there's leaves little or different issues to conquer once we get inside the door. So that is the main goal, and I totally understand as somewhat of a new skater. I'm still considered a new skater in these older establishments. I understand that reform might not be so easy because of identity politics. You know, I go to one place and they're more concerned about how I identify versus me saying there's something wrong. So the RMSA exists as an example to set. The code of conduct is available on the website for people not only in New York but across the world to take advantage of. And as I continue to look for spaces and advocate for spaces, the RMSA could just be like a guideline of, this is what could be done. I can't tell people what to do. I'm over that, especially in my age right now. I've done that before and it didn't work, so I'm just going to continue pushing forward. So the goal is to have the space, have the fun, have the programming, to kind of continue pushing the needle forward. And whoever follows along is great. But yeah, that is the big goal for me. And I know it's a really big, there's a lot of holes, there's a lot of, or not holes, there's a lot of room for a lot of things to exist. So that's, you know, the the plan for RMSA, at least as I'm
Hmm.
concerned.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a framework in some ways. It seems like it's kind of a hope for something different in some ways. It seems like it's also like an awareness building sort of thing in some ways. When you're out and skating and kind of doing your thing, how, if at all, is RMSA a part of that? How do you kind of bring RMSA to skate spaces or to other people? Um, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. So I realized before I even called, even before I named this a thing, I was already doing the thing, if that makes any sense. Wherever I go, I am myself wherever I go. So I'll be friendly wherever I go. I'll be helpful wherever I go. And I like to think of it more as RMSA speaking to me extending the things that I already have been offering. So I'm not just the only one doing it, right? I don't have to be the only one calling out things. I don't have to be the only one advocating. And through RMSA, it's the hope is to extend that idea of leadership, that there's not one person doing all the work, that there's multiple people doing the work. And something that I had to realize, and I guess in a very good way, the importance of or the understanding of influence. And for example, if anywhere I go, I'm going to be myself. I'm not hiding who I am. So that means wherever I go, that establishment needs to live up to the standards of me, right? Because if I am representing myself wherever I go and respecting the space in that way, that means people are looking at me as influence, and also that influence adds on to that establishment. So, I like to think of it as an extension of me and extension of the leadership that I've learned throughout the years, and the extension of collaboration and community that I see. I don't want to go off on a long tangent, but I hope that answers
I
the
think so.
question.
I mean, yeah, what I'm hearing is that part of it is about just the intention with which people show up to spaces and the conversations that may or may not happen around the issues that a community is facing. And what I'm hearing you say is like, I'm going to show up as myself, which is someone who is going to kind of challenge these things, who is going to want to talk about these things, and who is going to also try to kind of show up for other people around it. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what I'm hearing in what you're saying. And yeah, I guess I'm wondering too for listeners,
Yeah, that's
yeah, would you feel
exactly.
comfortable, like, for listeners kind of sharing, a little bit more broadly what people, including perhaps you, may experience kind of in the skate community, and some of the things more specifically that you're really wanting to challenge and really wanting to see shift?
Yeah, it's actually important to name these things. Otherwise, people don't know and it becomes very ambiguous. But in terms of predatory behavior, and the way I define predatory behavior is anyone going or preying on someone who they think is weaker than them in any way or form. So I see that in bullying. I've experienced people just like being mean in the space for no apparent reason. I've experienced people touching inappropriately, and you can call it groping. I've been groped a number of times. I've seen other people get groped, or just like very awkward situations where we know if we were outside in the outside world on the subway, if the same incident was to happen, it would go differently. And I will, that's a big bulk of the issue of inappropriate behavior that extends outside of the skate world, that goes into like personal messages and just things that are just not okay. And I realized, throughout my I guess you can call it research with just actually not just research, but just being in the community of
Observation,
roller
perhaps?
skating, that there's a major culture clash happening. My observation, there's a major culture clash happening, and how, I may define it as a predator, but the person doing the thing might not define themselves as a predator. They might just think they're doing,
Being
I don't know.
helpful
I can't
or
make those
whatever.
assumptions. The hope is to being helpful, or even the idea of, say, for example, and I just had this conversation maybe a week ago, an older gentleman who was used to doing things a different way because they, just from a different time, their idea of coming to a skating rink might be to pick up, to hook up, or not to hook up, but to mate in some way, hook up, whatever, however you want to define
Mhm.
that, meet their mate. Meanwhile, other people are there with the
Mm,
different intentions, and that culture clash of no one saying the thing just makes it kind of ongoing of, and I've seen this person go person to person versus it being a situation of saying like, hey, this is not the intention here. So yeah, those are like some of the main issues that I've experienced, and how other people have experienced. Also like identity politics, but just like, oh,
mm,
respectability politics as well. This idea of like they're OG or older and they have the right to my autonomy. No, that doesn't work like that. So there's a big, big, big gap in understanding of what is okay
mm.
and what is not okay. And I'm hoping, I know that RMSA will be that difference in conversation. Yeah.
I'm aware of an incident in which a particular skate space here in Brooklyn became crowded on the floor. So they tried to divide the skate up by gender. But the question is, can we talk about a time that you challenge the status quo in a skate space?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I'm always challenging the status quo, and I just learned that literally like a couple months ago, that I'm always challenging the status quo. I didn't know that. I just thought it was just me, regular me, but that doesn't really that's not a thing. But yes, in particular, there was one night in particular at Brooklyn Skates. We can name it. that they did a gender-based skating. And for me, it wasn't necessarily about me. Like, I know how to stand up for me. It was more so about the people who confided in me and also the older men in those establishments. So when it happened, I wasn't thinking it would be like a big protest, but I just kept skating when they said women only. And turned into like this kind of like this big conflict. I'm pretty sure a lot of those old people still talk about it because, with it, I realize the young people are the new soap opera. But for me, that was enough of a indicator that, or excuse me, the things that happened subsequently indicated to me that that's not a space for me to be in, and it's not a space for me to my presence to be in because of the lack of understanding of identity politics and respectability politics. And a big lesson from that incident was that we need more spaces. We need more spaces, and we should be activated to find more spaces because if we're waiting for an older generation to do it, they're not going to do it because they haven't done it yet. They haven't done it yet, and they just don't understand. And I would rather spend my time work talking to people and talking to establishments that understand versus trying to fight an old battle. Yeah, and that's kind of how I like I said, I'm always challenging the status quo. But that was like my Stonewall moment, if you know the reference of
No,
the Stonewall
absolutely.
reference.
And the fact that you did that reverberated outside of that night because I wasn't even personally there, but I've heard about it from so many other younger skaters who that moment was important to. It was very important to your peers and it's important to me. And honestly, it was like one of the main reasons that I wanted to interview you other than knowing you was that story and the impact of that. And as somebody who has felt uncomfortable in skate spaces and who has felt um, harassed and inappropriately not only like touched but interacted with, it was such a powerful thing for me to hear. And something that keeps coming up for me is most of my friends in roller skating that I spend a lot of time with are either in queer community or are very adjacent to queer community. And something that I think New York desperately needs is a queer skate night. Like
Ugh.
I would skate so much more if it existed.
Oh my God, don't get me started.
Yeah. I have to say thank you for letting me know that. Thank you for letting me know that because it can feel very isolating. I guess, yeah, it just can feel very isolating. I don't have hard feelings about that night. It happened and I'm very, it's who I am. But to hear back, even the younger people, hear you say younger people were championing for me means a lot to me because it feels like from the younger crowd, I've just come to realize that have a lot more audacity, but that just speaks to who I am in life. I've always had to have audacity by way of what I look like. And that audacity has turned into this fierce person that people that I didn't know existed, So thank you for telling me, just giving me those words. Uh, I really appreciate
No,
it.
totally. And thank you for, having the constitution within that moment to be able to do that. I Yeah, I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just add, like I said, I have to give a lot of praise and credit to the chosen family I did have. Problem solving uh, within our community did not exist, but they were the ones who taught me how to be so radical and to stand up for myself beyond my upbringing. So to me, it's nothing to just be like, "No, fuck that." It's nothing to be like, "Okay, come, let's get together and let's do what we have to do." It's so easy for me, so it's I'm thankful to be in this position that I was taken out of my bubble to get put into another bubble of sorts, another subculture to be like, "Okay, it doesn't have to be like this. It does not have to be like this at all." Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I think about, at least as like a trans person, is that like, so there are like plenty of like trans elders who are still saying a bunch of like super problematic shit all the time. That's kind of making life harder for trans people every once in a while. So there's a lot of controversy around some of these things, but I do think about how there's a lot
Mhm.
that I do learn or can learn from those people, even if some of the ideologies that they hold or some of the things that they carry from their past and their traumas and stuff are like problematic. And I also feel like there's things that they can learn from younger community, and there's ways that like younger community can also open their minds and allow them to like love themselves a little bit more or like shift their views and things like that. So I am curious, in terms of, you're talking about these sort of multi-generational spaces. You're talking about spaces where there is a large swath of people from different backgrounds. And I wonder, what do you think that some of the like older folks in community might be able to learn from the newer generation? And also maybe like, vice versa in terms of what maybe could the newer kind of generation learn or gain from the folks that have already kind of established some of these spaces?
Oh, I love this question. I've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks and understanding that the way it should flow is just like a infinity sign. We should always be gaining information from one generation to the next and not just one direction of the older teaching the younger. It should be the older teaching the younger, then the younger teaching the older, and continuously. I have a godson who's like 16, and whenever it's time for me to talk to him, I have to get like a pen and paper because he's giving me new vocabulary. He's telling me things that I just want to be exposed to. And that's the same way with older generation, but it's just a matter of getting over the respectability politics and being able to shut up and listen to the fact that there's another way. And something that I love, 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 love about the skate community and how I've been brought into it. I have skate peers and skate friends that are in their, I don't even know how old they are. They're 60 plus. I won't ask their age. And I have people who are like 19-year-olds inviting me to their birthday party. And there's all the same level of respect in terms of I can go to the 19-year-old's party and know how to maintain myself. And I can have a conversation with an elder without having to call them sir or mister, or if they ask me to, then the dialogue is there. So something that I like just love, 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 love is like I'm getting community in a way that speaks so much. It speaks beyond the walls of defining it as a queer space. And that's something that I was very intentional about with RMSA of it not just being a queer space, and realizing that we need each other. We really do need each other to know the differences, to have the difficult conversations, and to make those links that we need. We really need because you end up losing out. I was in queer community before, and as beautiful as it was, it's still limiting because it's only a certain age group, and we're just kind of like figuring things out as we go. Versus now in the skate community, I'm getting advice. I'm getting stories from people who are elders who don't know the answers. I don't expect them to know the answers. They don't expect me to know the answers either. We can at least sit down and talk and figure it out. And I can figure it out in maybe 4 months from now versus in the moment, but it's still community versus, just this idea of no one's listening and fear of the next person. So yeah, this just like this intergenerational love and connection, and that just sounded all like fairy and whatever, but it's like real shit in terms of intergenerational conversations that will push us forward versus us getting stuck in who's right and who's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to also, I don't know why it's a little bit of a tangent for me, but just for listeners, if you're not familiar with respectability politics, because I think that can be like a little bit of like a kind of a something that not everyone is familiar with. One, definitely look it up if you want to learn more, but also just to give a context to it,
Hmm.
respectability politics it can be multiple things, but a lot of times it's like more or less has to do with like assimilation of like marginalized cultures in order to be respected by and be able to have access to the things that we need in like more dominant cultures. But then within sort of certain cultural spaces, respectability politics can also come down to, right, like who is respected and why are they respected, and who is seen as quote unquote unacceptable
Mhm.
in a space. And if that person is unacceptable, quote unquote, again, to that space, that person is often seen as not having as much of a voice, and sort of needing to assimilate to XYZ thing in order to be respected in that space. Just again, for the context for listeners. And Kenny, I don't know if you want to add any more to that, but
Oh yeah, thank you for that. That was really no, that was a really
mhm.
perfect. Thank you, thank you.
I've been seeing some conversations online in the broader skate community where folks are talking about the role that roller skating plays in queer and Black liberation movements. Do you have any comments on the role that you see roller skating playing in that liberation and how it might evolve in the future?
Yeah, very interesting because I'm experiencing it myself as a queer person, how influence works, right? And how do I even tackle this question without being messy? I'll just say it by way of like the things that have happened to me and just like the problem solving that needs to happen in this community. I've become isolated and, will skate by myself or skate with only certain people or on certain days just to avoid the angst of what exists in the skate community. And long story short, I see how people copy, right? Copy things that I've made up. And I know it's things that I've made up because I'm making things up because I don't have anyone else to skate with. So of course I'm making them up. I can identify these moves. And on one hand, it's very frustrating because I'm like, oh my gosh, you could have included me. Like the opportunity for community is right there. But it shows me, it goes back to the respectability politics, right? Of just like, I'm a marginalized person for whatever reason, whatever reasons, you know, this group of people did not come to me. So what is happening? I have influence over them because I've created this thing that they are not doing, right? So we cannot ignore, absolutely cannot ignore, and I don't have to go to a history reference. It happened to me as a queer person, making up my own thing and watching people copy. So it's a hard, it's nothing for me to tackle. I've realized it's a matter of continuing to live. And just like I said before, I can't reform spaces and I can't force people to be in one way or another. Well, what I can do is have my own space, right? I can have my own space and have my own platform and have influence over the spaces that are listening. And then whoever copies will copy. But I look at it in that way versus trying to look at it from the other way of tackling it as an issue. I see it as me as a person of influence and the other queer and Black people as people of influence that help shift and shape culture. And the more I empower myself in understanding who I am and how I show up to places, will set the tone. Um, yeah, you know, I hope that
Yeah.
says something or answers the
Yeah.
question.
I think
Uh,
I think for me, when I think of Black and queer liberation having an intersection with roller skating, I do notice that there are a lot of
mhm,
roller skaters that are looking for liberation, and I feel like that's a common thread that I find in roller
mhm,
skating community. And I guess what I'm wondering is why is roller skating a I don't know what the word it is that I'm looking for. Why is roller skating a space that attracts those looking for liberation? I guess is my question because
Right.
it feels like there's a lot of us.
Like, what is it about skating kind of?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, culturally, yeah,
mm.
wow, so much to that question. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot to that question, but I think it's the activity of movement and movement without limitation. Movement that is fun. It's exercise, but you don't really realize that you're exercising. And it's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's joyful. It brings out something that's inside of you. You're using what is it, the right side of the brain. You're using a different side of the brain that we're not used to using on a regular basis. And it's spiritually freeing. So there's that liberation there. And I realized something that's very interesting in terms of like skate culture and like even down to music that is played and bringing it back to my experience. Since I am isolated in certain areas and certain times, I'm listening to whatever I want to listen to. And I'm becoming more liberated by the music that I'm listening to that sets the tone for the people who are not used to thinking outside of the box, who are not
I like
creatives.
that.
Um, and it's interesting because it makes me think again about being a influencer, but having intention
Yeah.
behind the influence. If I know people are copying, I can get mad about it, or I could just realize the power that I have and be like, okay, actually, perfect example. There's going to be a playlist that I'm offering to the podcast to help people just like there's different songs you can listen to, and you can liberate your body with different songs because a different song you're gonna hit a different beat versus hitting the 2 and the 4, which is what, rhythm skating is all about. So that liberation, I it's all there. It's just a matter of unboxing, you know, that those things that people have in their brains. And it usually comes from the most marginalized people because we have to make a way. We have to make a way to find joy. We have to make a way to
Yeah.
continue moving forward.
Yeah.
So liberation of the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm giving this history as a white person, so please gather me by all means if necessary. But, I'm also just thinking historically and sociopolitically about
Hmm.
how important it is to have spaces where they're just for a certain group of people. And I'm thinking about like places like Skate Key or places like older, like, way back when there were rinks and it's like people, like rappers and like R&B artists and people are coming and they're playing live music. And it's a space where it's a community where it's like, okay, it's kind of just us, like it's just like kind of black folks. And it's like we have this space that is kind of protected from these outside influences that otherwise would be pretty oppressive, and we get to all be here like celebrating our culture together in a lot of different ways, celebrating each other as artists, celebrating each other as, however we're showing up to this space and thinking about that through the same context you're talking about, Kenny, of music is involved, movement is involved. And personally, I think there's something really spiritual about music, movement, especially in a group. And I think also, if you look even further back, like historically as human beings, like we have been doing that together since like the beginning of time, like creating sound with rhythm, moving our bodies and doing it in
Oh
community.
yeah.
And there's something that is really important about, I think, and I'll say this, I guess, in terms of my experience with like being in spaces that are just trans or spaces that are just queer, where it's like, you know, there's an understanding that we have with one another that goes beyond language. And when you
Hmm.
start to incorporate something like play, movement, dance, rhythm, and you like, I've also played in spaces where it's like we're all just jamming together and we're all playing instruments, and you look around the room and it's like we're all just like on this wavelength together. And there is something so sort of spiritual and special about that, I think. So just to kind of throw that out there too, I think when we think historically about it, roller skating has come from this place of all of those things converging, I think. And there is something really special and beautiful about being able to have music and movement and togetherness all kind of in one and sort of transcending language, right? It's really easy. And I think these days for all of us to sit around a table and be like, let's all talk about the thing. Like you even said earlier, right? Like I can think about the thing in my mind, but to be able to
Hmm.
transcend some of that a little
Hmm.
bit and move it through your body in the context and through being witnessed by other people
Hmm.
in your community
People
is
that
like,
get it.
people that get it is really its own form of healing that you don't really access through like just talking about something. Like for me, like being witnessed in play is like one of the single most healing things I've ever experienced, because as a young
Right.
person, I didn't really get that. I didn't really get being seen. I didn't really get like my type of play was seen as like weird, or like there weren't people around me that were like, oh yeah, baby, like self-express, like be your little weird gender non-conforming self. It was kind of like, no, conform, conform, conform. So now as an adult, being able to do that, whether it's wearing whatever I want in a skate space and goofing around and
Hmm.
trying and failing, but having people celebrate me anyway, there's something really, for me at least, liberatory about that. So
Yeah. And people that you don't have to explain yourself
mhm,
to, you
mhm,
know?
mhm. And I think that's where this conflict in skate community becomes so hurtful and so, like you
Right.
said, isolating, because
Right.
it's like I feel like I'm in a space where I shouldn't really have to explain myself, but there are still these behaviors and these things that are happening that are so hurtful to me, that are violating my autonomy, that are making me feel unsafe, that are creating a situation where I came here to be in community, to dance, to move, to be kind of liberated, but actually I'm sort of being oppressed in this space in certain ways. Like there is something so isolating and so painful about that. And I think that's also why these conversations are so important, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the spiritual component too, because that's another aspect that I guess I don't really speak to that often, or maybe, or I guess it doesn't really matter. It depends on who I'm talking to. But there's a huge spiritual component to roller skating. The combination of music, movement, and play, like all those things that happen that are so important, and which is why I'm so excited to get over the hump that is in the way of the actual fun, like the actual healing that exists, because so much of us, or excuse me, once again, I have these conversations in private, but there'll be private conversations of how these things are healing. There are private conversations of how these things are spiritual. But what ends up happening is we're talking about this person who has touched X, Y, and Z, or this other thing. And really thankful that you brought it up, because I can get a little bit lost in the defensiveness of it all. But yeah, roller skating has so much to offer beyond, and it's really, for me, it's been my own spiritual journey. But as I continue to talk to people, I hear people in their spiritual journey, and I've either been in this spiritual journey or I'm going through the same stage in this spiritual journey of figuring things out and understanding how special roller skating is, how special the movement is. So it's just I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours and hours about how done wonderful things to my for my mental health and my confidence and my ability to show up in the world now versus before.
And to balance all of this play and fun and freedom, how do we balance between having serious dialogues in the skate space while still having fun?
Oh, that's a good question. Right now, I think it's on an interpersonal way, interpersonal as in people who I'm in community with, and I talk about roller skating all the freaking time and RMSA all the time. So it should be a conversation that, if we're just walking down the streets of the train, we can kind of talk about something, because if it starts there, the the comfort level becomes easier on the outer layers of having to talk about it again. And in the future, I hope to look like is maybe some sort of a round table of sorts, or not even a round table. I'll say, for example, at Riverbank, something that we used to do, a group of friends, we would skate there and then leave and end up stretching or just sitting down to talk um, before the night is over. And those are the perfect times to talk about social issues. We should kind of get more comfortable talking about the issues, because otherwise it becomes taboo. And it's a build up and something that's waiting to happen versus we speaking in the moment and not waiting for Kenny to say it, but just being activated by a conversation that you had with Kenny. So then you can go ahead and have it over here, and you can have it over there, and have it whenever it comes up. So these things are no longer a thing. We're talking about. We get the ability to talk about. We don't have to. Excuse me. We don't have to talk about. It doesn't have to be a hard conversation. It can be an easy conversation. We just have to lead ourselves into the
Mhm,
conversation
mhm.
from the beginning.
Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about your experience with skate jams, Kenny. So you've traveled to several skate jams. What has that been like, and what has that meant for you?
Oh, I love the skate jams. The skate jams are like my booster shot, my wheatgrass, or what is it that they add to the shot, the juices, whatever. The skate jams are so, so, so magical. Um, they're really magical, and they are just so like words are kind of I'm at a loss for words. They're so magical, and the energy that exists there, it's unexplainable, and it's once again speaks to spirituality, and when people are showing up with the intention to have fun and the intention to show love to the thing that shows them love, it's just such a magical experience. Also, I it serves as my market research to say like, "Oh, okay, they're doing this over here. We can do this. Why aren't we doing this in New York? We should do this in New York." I freaking love skate jams, and I encourage people to go if you feel comfortable going, because then you get to see, especially the New Yorkers, you get to see what else exists out there, and you get to see how people are really having fun. I can't. There's no whatever way to measure how much fun people are having. But I could tell people are having much more fun outside of New York than we are, because they're trying new things. They're moving their body differently. No, seriously, they're trying new things. They're moving their bodies differently. They're dressing up. They're teaming up. They're something that I would love to bring to New York. Not just me, anyone listening, bringing JB, the style of JB to New York for multiple reasons. It's cool. It's easier on the knees than what we do, the knees and the ankles than what we do in New York. And also it really encourages camaraderie and teamwork. You know, you can do JB singly, or you can do J. It looks better when you do JB in a group, and you come up with a routine. And the group does the routine, you know, and the group meets up to do the routine. It just enforces community and camaraderie versus here in New York, one person's doing this and one person's doing that over there, and then, you know, there's rivalry. No, no, no. So the skate jams are just like, uh, can't wait to the next one actually, because it's beyond a vacation. It's market research, it's culture, it's the perfect place to see what else exists and a place to just continue to build in terms of community. Like we all have the same common interests. So imagine we'll have others.
So speaking of JB, I know that you skated with Calvin Small in Chicago. Can you tell me what that was like?
Mm.
Oh, that was so amazing. So amazing. So amazing. So before that trip, I did not know who he was. I didn't really know too much about JV outside of what I've seen on Instagram. And I have to tell everyone listening, you have to go in person to really get the full, you get to feel the energy in the room and just like it's just beyond. Meeting Kevin. So a friend, actually Fancy, my one of my best skate friends, she's the one who invited me for her birthday, and I was like, "Okay, let's go," you know, whatever. Not really thinking much of it. And the first night we went skating, I was actually nervous because I'm so used to the hazing that happens in New York and New Jersey. That I'm like, "Oh, I just hope everyone's nice to us," and people were just so hospitable. We asked someone like, who, you know, "Where do we go to get lessons?" They're like, "Oh, any one of us
Oh,
can teach you. Like, we all love it so much that we'll teach you." And that was like my introduction to JB. They were people that we met, Nikki and Ryan. Love y'all so much. They you know made sure we had places to go and like made sure like we were in the right or wrong neighbor or left at the right time because of the neighborhood that we were in. And the night that we met Kevin, it was actually the end of a skate session. We were just friggin' ecstatic. It was just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe." And we're like, "Damn, you know, we didn't get to have a formal lesson like we thought we would have." And we met. This all happened just like so crazy. Now that I'm recanting it, Skate Goddess, as we were leaving the space and asking them, you know, "Hey, you know, what lesson do you know if there are any lessons that we can do?" And they're like, "Well, you know, I'm not teaching lessons this weekend, but you can ask Kevin, and he's one of the founders of JB." And, a big jaw drop, and Clancy was like, "Oh, yeah, I know who that is, I know who that is." And we met with him. He was like, "Oh, yeah, come back tomorrow, pay whatever." I think it was I don't wanna say, but it was nothing much. And he was like, "Yeah, just come tomorrow." It was the 30 plus night. I was the only one that was 30 plus, and we went. He gave us, like, a little intimate lesson, and beyond the lesson, something that, oh, it's really, really touching to my heart. As we were leaving for the night, and that was like our last night skating there, we were waiting for our Uber. The Uber was like 20 minutes out because of where we were in location. Calvin, brought us back inside and he gave us like a history lesson of the rank that we were in and just about JB. And something that I just would have never expected, but just she showed the love that really exists in that space and how that rink that they were in, which is now a black-owned rink, used to be a segregated rink, and a rink that black skaters would get arrested, if they didn't leave at a certain time because there's curfew in the neighborhood. And I'm kind of like jumping all over in terms of where the story lies, but something that I'm so, so, so grateful for and so grateful and which really speaks to the foundation of why RMSA means so much more to me than I guess anyone would even know until you hear the story because told us to our faces how important roller skating was to him back in the day and how spiritual it was, how special it was, and how people would risk their freedom just to come and skate for the night and find ways to go home outside of the barricades that were set up for them to be
wow.
arrested. Um, oh, wow. So, so, so thankful for that moment. So thankful. I have to go back to Chicago. I have to go back to Chicago. And it makes me think I am one to, I'm a spiritual person and I believe in divine time and all those things. And he didn't know what RMSA was at the time. I didn't fully know what RMSA was at the time either, but him telling that story was something that was so magical. And extremely thankful to have that. And thank you, Jasmine, for even
Yeah.
reminding me of that because it can be hard in working in the moment and working through community issues that I kind of forget that those special moments happened and they happened for a reason. They happened for Jasmine to remind me of and to keep pushing forward. No, seriously, thank you.
Sorry.
No, of course. And thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful.
Yeah. I think it also speaks to that piece of like, what can
Mm,
we kind of learn from folks that have been around a little bit longer? And like, what can those folks maybe learn from us? And it just exemplifies such a beautiful moment of one of those kind of like
mhm,
intergenerational conversations that, yeah, you're like carrying a piece of history forward with you now in a way that you can name and speak to. Yeah, which is really beautiful.
mhm,
So you talked a bit about how
yeah,
other
mhm,
skate
yeah.
communities seem to be having a bit more fun, but I still have to ask, after traveling to skate jams and then coming home to NYC, what makes the skate community here unique?
What makes the skate community here very unique is that once you've been bitten by the skate bug, there's no stopping. So like where people will travel to. And I thought I was crazy for traveling places, but people are doing some traveling on a regular basis, and I'm like, "Okay, maybe you take the cake in terms of how crazy you are, but n not crazy." It just shows how passionate we are about it, and, makes me feel a lot more normal about the lengths that we go, the money that we spend. I know you know about the money that people spend
Absolutely.
on their skates. It makes me very proud to be a part of something that people are proud of as well. Despite any of the issues, we all really love this activity. And it shows that if once we get over the hump once we find the space and we do the advocating, that we can just have just as much fun as other places. The passion is here. I know it's here. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm really thankful because if it wasn't that, it would be nothing. There would be no RMSA. There would be no reason for me to continue to hope because, there just wouldn't be any hope here. But there is hope because the people are here. So yeah, New York is very special because of
Yeah.
that.
Even thinking about the fact that like there really aren't any rinks in Brooklyn, really, and how creative people one, to me, it's like people have to be so creative with where we're actually skating in Brooklyn. And then two, people literally are like constantly going out to like Long Island or New Jersey and will do it like multiple times a day. So not only traveling outside of like, to bigger events elsewhere, but also literally just like traveling out of state like multiple times a week just to be able to skate to me is always, I'm just like, wow, the passion.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much
Hmm.
me. That's pretty much me during the winter times. I am in New Jersey at
Hmm.
least twice a week. So, New Jersey from Harlem. So that's I know people from going from the Bronx to New Jersey or going from the Bronx to Long Island. So the passion is there, or from the city to Connecticut. So the passion is there, which is it's really comforting. I know I'm not alone in this passion, which is great.
What does the rhythm skating community in New York City mean to you?
So to me, it means oh, it's just like a lot of culture. So I am first generation American of Jamaican and Nigerian parents, and a question that I've always asked growing up, just to myself, was like, what is American culture? Like, what is American culture to me? Black American culture, because at home looks very different than culture outside of home. Home is a little Jamaica versus, another black home. And rhythm skating for me has been like answered the question I've had as a child, like where does culture exist? Where does culture how is culture cultivated? And now with rhythm skating, I'm finding where the culture is. and not just where the culture is, but where it's thriving and how it's being spread. Like I said before, in terms of like influence, who has influence, who doesn't have influence, or what happens when you have influence. And rhythm skating has just sh- showed me how culturally how uh, the things that I've learned from my Nigerian side and my Jamaican side exist culturally within our blood, and it's still over here in roller skating, right? We in one way or another, we can call a night at Branch Brook when the music is playing. You can call that a ritual of sorts. You know, it's a celebration. It's church. It's ceremonial. And I, to me, it's me. It means so much because it helps me understand how much we're all alike, the things that we need to survive, the cultural things that we need to survive from one to the next. And yeah, just like so much culture, and yeah, culture in ways that are so rich, richer than I thought I would ever understand.
I love that so much. And I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up the roller skating aspect of the conversation. But before we go, I do want to ask you a little bit about your design work.
Mhm.
Hmm. Which design work?
I mean, I guess one way of asking it would be, how does your activism in skating overlap with your activism through fashion? I know that you've done a lot of, sort of thought provoking campaigns and designs.
Hmm. So, I guess the best way to answer that is, once again, it's just all of it is me, right? All of it is an extension of me. The way I show up, what I wear, um, how I speak for myself. And in terms of design, just in general, just design and art has always been my way of speaking for me without having to speak from a young age, and my way to help, identify myself and to stand out once again without speaking. And right now, it's made that crossover in terms of activism. Because do I need to tell everyone the rules everywhere I go? No, I don't need to do that. But my shirt can, you know, by just having a shirt that says "Respect My Space" on the back of it. It's a perfect intersection of design and who I am. Because I get to dress up, send a message, and not just send a message, but anyone could wear a shirt that says "Respect My Space" on the back of it. But it enforces it not enforces it challenges me, the wearer, to make sure I'm on my P's and Q's too. And it's something I just love, love, love about design. That design is a reflection of the times that we're living in versus just creating to create. And yeah, it's just all an extension of me that makes it very fun. Very fun. I'm glad to think of it like this. I used to have a weird connection to design by way of uh, the fashion industry. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is I'm glad to have to bring design into life by way of designing this new idea of living and skating, right? Designing a new way to show up in spaces, representing myself, but also advocating for other people by way of wearing something that says a statement. Um, yeah, all the above.
That's awesome. And I think that really
I'm also very modest about those things, so
no, I think it really encapsulates a lot, and you've done a lot of good work, and we're going to be sure to link RMSA in our show notes as well as your online boutique, OK Bleep.
yes, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And thanks so much for making time for us on such a busy day. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share with listeners before we say goodbye.
What should I share? I will say, once again, thank you for even listening, if you've listened to this whole interview. Um, I encourage everyone to check out at the very least, check out rmsanyc.com and read the code of conduct. Read the code of conduct and see what it means to you. And however you feel activated afterwards. There's no call to action with RMSA. The only call to action is what you feel inside of you. So that's how to respond. So, it's up to interpretation, just like respect my space is up to interpretation to the reader. And thank you again, Jasmine and Mac, for giving me this time and space to share my loopy thoughts that are in my brain
It's not loopy at all.
and such
They're
and
quite
such.
coherent and meaningful. And yeah,
Thank
totally.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being here
you.
with us.
Yeah, we appreciate it and
Mhm.
hope to skate with you
No
soon.
problem. Yes, hope to skate soon.
Yes. All right. So, yeah, Kenny,
Okay.
thanks so much for being here with us. It's been so fun and so enlightening. And can't wait to see you around. Bye.
Thanks, Kenny. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Hey, Jasmine here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We want to thank you for your continued support of the Skaterade podcast. And if you'd like to keep up with us, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as on Instagram at Skaterade Pod. Don't forget to give us a like, a follow, or leave a review to make it easier for folks to find our podcast. If you've done all of that and you want to show your support with a Skaterade sticker or patch, you can find links to scoop them up in our show notes and Instagram link tree. Thank you so much for all you do. Skate hard, have fun.